Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Alexander and welcome to Random Chapters. For the next 10 weeks, every Saturday, I'll be reading a random chapter from one of my novels. And to start off today, I'm heading back to the very beginning, to my very first book, The Bark Cutters. When The Bark Cutters was released, it was shortlisted for an Australian Book Industry Award, which, as you can imagine, is very exciting for a debut author. So first of all, I'm going to read a little bit from the back of the book so you have an idea of what the story is about. The Bark Cutters is an Australian family saga that centres around a family property in northwestern New South Wales. Past and present interweave in a story that traces the Gordon family from the arrival of Scottish immigrant Hamish Gordon in the 1850s to the life of his great-granddaughter Sarah. So that's a very brief outline of the story. And the random chapter I've chosen for today is entitled Autumn 1854, the Scottish Highlands. So let's begin. Hamish Gordon studied the prone figure lying on the thin pallet of grass. From the sweat-soaked bedding, an acrid smell wafted about the small room. For days now, his beloved Mary had lain motionless, appearing to study the lance of light rippling across the thatched roof of the small hut, eating nothing, unable to speak. He poured water from a leather pouch through her cracked lips and leaned back on his knees as the cool fluid trickled down her chin. The fever had finally broken. She would survive. About him a brisk wind brought the smell of herbage, the lingering scent of the seasons last before winter. In the past, such smells delighted him. Now it only served to remind him of the bleak days ahead. With one last look at the young woman he once hoped would be his bride, Hamish left the hut. He walked down towards the loch through rippling green and purple vegetation, his leather boots striking the soil that yielded so easily for his family. At the loch's edge he pulled off his shirt and kilt and walked waist-high into the freezing water, splashing himself with the cold liquid, as if the action would cleanse himself of Mary's betrayal. The coldness made his bladder empty itself immediately, and as the warmth eddied about his thighs, he watched the clumps of purple on the land swell in the wind, the sprigs of violet seeming to dart towards him. Hamish knew he could no longer stay in this place, his home for the last 17 years. Once he could have borne it, even with the recent death of his mother. However, the dreadful pain of Mary's actions still burned in his chest, and he knew it would never lessen if he remained. Mary of Clanranald had appeared like a wisp of sunlight in the deepest fog only 2 months prior. Her voice reminded Hamish of the pure cadence of a flowing brook, and she was a type of woman that others admired. Pretty, strong, and undemanding. She was, in fact, the finest thing Hamish Gordon had ever seen. The fire-red lustre of her hair, the firm pink flesh of her parted lips, the strength of her fingers intertwined with his. He would have died for her. Returning to his hut, he slung a water pouch and his rolled bedding over the shoulder of his thick woolen tunic before tucking his knife securely in his kilt, along with a small portion of dry oatmeal from their precious stores. A dense fog was rolling in across the loch, and he intended to be across the trickling burn and traversing the hill before it arrived to engulf their thatched hut. But outside, his father barred his path. "You'll be lost to me then, lad," he said. Adjusting the leather straps across the broad wedge of his chest, Hamish considered the violet-eyed man, whose resemblance to the father of his boyhood now lay depleted by injustice. "Aren't you forgetting you're dead? What of your wee sisters?" his father persevered. "They're gone, and not to be coming back either," Hamish answered curtly, brushing past him. "And what would you be expecting? That your ma and wee sisters will not know that you've left? They'll know, lad." Hamish listened to the puff of his father's breath as he laboured up the hill behind him. "Aye, and they know what type of father you've been also." Silence answered him. Hamish thought of the brief respite summer brought before winter descended upon them. Soon enough the remaining inhabitants of the hut would be bringing the cow in for winter, sharing their meagre dwelling with their prized possession. They would spend freezing days with pitchfork in hand, scooping the animal shit off the dirt floor and out into the heather. Many of our neighbours have managed to stay on. Hamish stopped abruptly and turned. His father's eyes remained steely, unrepentant. He recalled the great bear hugs of his youth, the harsh red gold of his father's beard on his cheek, stinging like a burst of sharp, sleet-peppered rain. It was all too late. Aye, and many have been forced to settle on the coast as crofters. I've heard the stories, father, eking out a subsistence, living from fish and farming, a small holding with high rents and starvation for company. I have no taste for such things. You imagine to be a drover then? His father scoffed. You wondered if his father honestly believed he was only leaving home to find a different type of work. What, and receive the generous sum of 1 shilling a day, driving cattle purchased by the English at Falkirk to England? Hamish answered. Aye, and they would not trust you, lad. You're a Highlander. They would clap irons on you for theft, whether you were responsible or not. His father's cracked hands took him by the shoulders. I know you grieve, lad, but give it time. Hamish shrugged him off. I can't forgive you. He turned his back on his father. Only one goodbye remained. Regardless of what he thought of his younger brother's role in his betrayal, he did need to see the lad. Hamish thought of their short years together, to the illness that young Charlie suffered every winter, to his tendency to get lost, not listen, nor follow advice. It was best to leave the boy behind. Besides, Hamish was past caring for anyone anymore. With a swipe at the tears gathering in his eyes, he turned in the opposite direction to his father. The springy turf of autumn, already grown sparse with the season, crackled beneath Hamish's feet. The top of their hill was only a few strides away when Charlie's tear-bloated face appeared before him, his young lips trembling. I'll come too. No, lad. Hamish tried to curb the anger of the past few weeks. Yes, Charlie persevered. Please. It won't be an easy journey. I've no idea where I'm going, and I may well leave this country altogether. Goodbye, lad. Take care. Hamish shifted his belongings into a more comfortable position and trudged on upwards into the gathering fog, his feet following the path worn bare by their traffic. He looked behind only once, to see his father disappear as a sheet of whiteness descended into the valley below, obliterating their hut from view. Closer, he could still see Charlie following at a cautious pace. Leave me, Charlie. His voice echoed in the whiteness. Surely the lad would become disorientated and be forced to return to their valley. But the persistent shush shush of stamped vegetation answered him. Hamish grunted and increased his pace. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that random chapter from my first novel, The Bark Cutters. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a great day.